Welcome to the 27th episode of our show, The Second Sex, where we continue our journey through Simone de Beauvoir's groundbreaking analysis of women's lived experience and its lasting impact on feminist thought. In this episode, we turn to Chapter 14, The Independent Woman, from Toward Liberation section covering pages 812 to 847.
That's right. And this chapter is really pivotal if things like voting rights are sort of abstract liberties.
Yeah.
Beauvoir argues that real, concrete freedom, well, it comes down to something much more basic. Economic independence. Work.
Okay.
So in these pages, she really digs into what that independence actually looked like for women back then. And spoiler alert, it's a lot more complicated than just saying she works.
Exactly. We're focusing just on Chapter 14 for this deep dive, and our mission really is to pull out the core insights Beauvoir offers here. The tensions, the challenges she saw for working women.
Let's do it. So her main argument is pretty straightforward, actually. Work is the key. It's the main way for women to gain that concrete freedom, to start closing the gap with men.
And she explains why. Right? It lets a woman stop being what she calls a parasite.
Which is a provocative term, yeah.
Definitely. And regain her transcendence, that ability to project herself forward through goals, and really affirm herself as a subject, an actor in the world. Feel responsible.
And what's really powerful is how she finds dignity in any work. There's that anecdote about the cleaning woman.
Oh, yeah. Washing the hotel lobby floor.
Right. Who tells Beauvoir so proudly, I never asked anyone for anything. I made it on my own. And Beauvoir actually puts that pride on par with, like, a Rockefeller's.
Wow. It's about that fundamental self-sufficiency.
Exactly. Earning your own way. But, and this is crucial, Beauvoir is also incredibly clear-eyed. She says work, as it existed then, in that non-socialist world.
Yeah.
It wasn't total liberation. Not even close.
Right. She specifically says only in a socialist world would work truly guarantee freedom.
Yeah, because in the reality she's describing, most workers are exploited, and maybe even more importantly, the whole social setup, customs, expectations, it's all still fundamentally male-oriented.
Which leads directly to the double burden, right?
Yeah. Working women, especially in factories or lower-paid jobs, they weren't freed from housework. They just did both.
Clock out, clock back in at home.
Pretty much. She mentions those Renault factory women who actually said they'd rather stay home, not because they hated work necessarily, but the factory felt like, well, not their world.
It wasn't designed for them or by them.
Exactly. And society, husbands, they just didn't step up to make genuine equality possible. The load still fell on the woman.
And that pressure, that lack of support, could make dependence seem, well, tempting.
Yeah, especially if your wages were really low. Like a shop girl or secretary barely making ends meet. Society demands a certain standard, and maybe leaning on a man seemed like the only way to get there.
Becoming a kept woman, as she puts it.
Right. Which often leads to what she calls double servitude. You've got the job demands, and you're dependent on masculine protection or money, bound in two ways.
Okay, so that's the reality for many. But then she looks at the more privileged few, the professional women who did achieve economic autonomy.
The ones often held up in debates about feminism. And Beauvoir's take is, well, pretty bracing. She says even they have only come halfway.
Halfway? What holds them back?
It's this deep internal conflict she identifies. For a man, his work success reinforces his male identity. It all lines up.
Okay.
But for a woman, traditional femininity demands she be passive, an object, and that clashes head-on with being an active, sovereign subject through her work.
So you either reject femininity and feel, mutilated?
Yeah.
Or conform and feel like it's servitude.
That's the tension she describes. It's a really tough spot, and this femininity isn't just internal, it's imposed. Makeup, clothes, how you present yourself.
And if you don't play the game?
You're a rebel, devalued socially, maybe even sexually, because your value is tied up in conforming.
And the time, the energy. She talks about mending stockings, washing blouses.
Right, all the upkeep. Things a man just wouldn't be expected to spend time on after his workday. Fittings, beauty care. It adds up.
Plus the home. Even if she's single, the professional woman feels she needs a perfect home, right? A man's messy place is okay, hers isn't.
Exactly. And why conform? Beauvoir suggests it's deep-seated. Upbringing, childhood dreams, wanting to feel like a real woman, combining the job with that traditional destiny.
So the result is trying to live both like a man and like a woman.
Yeah. Full-time career plus the full-time traditional female role, which means basically exhaustion and constant tension.
And that tension affects everything, especially relationships.
Oh, definitely. Professionally, they might be equals in the male world, but in private life, The demands aren't symmetrical at all.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Success might make her attractive, but being an independent subject goes against the old script.
Right. And Beauvoir says this can create an inferiority complex as a female, feeling like you don't measure up to that feminine ideal.
And it makes relating to men tricky. She mentions independent women feeling like amateurs at seduction compared to full-time flirts.
Yeah, they don't have the time. And their self-awareness, knowing they're a consciousness, not just a body, gets in the way of being that spontaneously offered prey.
So trying to be charming feels forced.
It can, yeah. Or they overcompensate, deny their intelligence, act naive, or go the other way, using masculine weapons, talking too much, showing off ideas.
Like mode de style, she mentions.
Right. But men, Beauvoir observes pretty bluntly, often prefer slaves to equals. They get irritated by women who take charge or seem too clever. They want to be the conqueror.
She also doesn't shy away from the practical dangers for women exploring sexuality back then.
ED.
Pregnancy.
Especially with limited birth control, yeah. And physical safety. Those anecdotes about women being robbed or attacked.
The one in the Bois de Boulogne.
Yeah, they really drive home the vulnerability women faced stepping outside traditional protections.
And this idea of sex is taking versus giving.
Men are the actors, the subjects. Women, even independent ones, might try to gain power indirectly by proving their worth to the man, relying on his desire.
So when a woman tries to take, to be the active one, she risks humiliation if she's rejected.
Yeah.
Because she made herself vulnerable.
That's the idea. She risks becoming a fixed and useless object. It's a failure of her very being, in a way, not just a failed action.
And the whole free woman versus easy woman confusion must have been paralyzing.
Absolutely. Fear of judgment, public opinion, it held many back.
Then there's the dynamic in bed itself. Men wanting to ravish, assert superiority.
Yeah, her pleasure has to be a form of submission. If she refuses passivity, it can actually interfere with her own satisfaction. Mimicking dominance might lead to frigidity.
What about masochism, just abandoning oneself?
Beauvoir considers it, but thinks it's hard for independent women. They see men's flaws and posturing day to day, so it's difficult to genuinely believe in their superiority enough to truly surrender. That miming virility can seem childish.
So finding genuine equals is harder for women. Men can admire a woman's charm, overlook flaws, but women struggle to find men they see as equals who don't insist on being superior.
That's what she suggests. It's an asymmetry. Many women make do, she says, but bury disappointments. Affairs tend to bind women more, and breakups hurt more deeply.
All these difficulties tend to push women towards monogamy, she argues.
Yes. But then you have the clash between a serious relationship or marriage and a career. It's a much bigger conflict for women.
The choice seems to be sacrifice career ambition for the relationship or risk being alone.
Pretty much. She does acknowledge men are starting to accept working wives. Sometimes it even frees the man up.
Like Lewis and George Eliot.
Right, where the man plays the devoted supporter. But the typical reality, the woman pays the price for domestic peace. She runs the house, raises the kids.
Partly out of consideration, partly out of that ingrained sense of woman's destiny.
Exactly. She becomes a double for her husband, torn between her career self and her domestic self.
She makes an interesting kind of complex point about inferiority having an advantage. Can you unpack that?
It's subtle. The idea is coming from below, a woman doesn't feel social guilt towards men in the way a well-meaning man might feel responsible for women's inequality, potentially making him vulnerable.
Ah, okay. But despite that, women often forge their own chains through love, adopting that attitude of the woman in love.
Yes, tied to upbringing again. The myth of the rescuing hero, the desire for glorious abdication, needing male approval to feel worthy.
So they're tempted to just give up autonomy for love. But she says adoring love is obsessive, destructive.
Right. And professional setbacks don't make you focus more on work. They make you resent work for keeping you from the great love you crave. Remember the anecdote about the women at the political magazine?
Talking endlessly about love, lives instead of politics.
Exactly. To love freely, like a man, without it being your whole existence, you'd need real equality outside the relationship too. Shared projects, equal investment, still rare then.
And then there's motherhood, another massive hurdle.
She calls it almost impossible to undertake in complete freedom. Lack of birth control meant unwanted kids, illegal abortions.
Huge burdens on a career, plus the stigma of being an unwed mother.
Right, and even if you chose motherhood, the lack of childcare, nurseries, kindergartens was crippling. You either gave up your career or abandoned the child to others, essentially.
So the choice was often between sterility and burdens that kill a career.
That's the stark picture she paints. So the independent woman is constantly divided, stressed, juggling, making sacrifices.
And this constant tension, she argues, is what causes the nervousness or frailty, often blamed on female biology.
Yes. She even mentions doctors seeing psychic causes for physical issues. It's the situation, the stress, not just the body. Meaningful work, she thinks, should actually help balance things out, prevent obsession with minor ailments.
Okay, let's talk about starting out. Those early career years, 18 to 30.
A really tough time. Internal conflicts are raging. Family and friends often don't take her ambitions seriously, unlike a young man's. They impose duties, restrict her freedom.
So she's caught between her past upbringing, feminine dreams, and her future interests.
Which can lead to outward awkwardness. Either rejecting femininity too strongly or overdoing the feminine act. Both are agitated, draining energy from work.
And seeing other women living comfortably through dependence must be demoralizing.
Hugely. That quote, "When I think I have to get everything from my brain," it captures that sense of arbitrary difficulty.
Men feel they have to work. Women often have to keep choosing it, keep renewing the decision.
Yes, advancing more timidly, maybe. Always aware of the other chances, marriage, dependence, what she might be giving up. Success itself can feel threatening to those chances.
Which feeds into that inferiority complex she mentioned.
Deep-seated stuff. Believing, because society tells you so, that you're just not as capable as boys. That study of 14-year-old girls really believing it.
Wow. And the result is settling for less.
Often, yeah. Mediocre success. Earning a living feels like the main achievement. That thought, not bad for a woman, limits ambition. Fear of failure is higher.
And others don't have confidence either. Men resist the parvenu, and even other women sometimes prefer male authority.
So she's constantly having to prove herself, starting from behind, which can lead to being overly authoritative or a stickler for rules or just tense, focusing on proving her worth instead of the work itself.
Like those American women enjoying the status of having a job, but maybe not the job itself.
Right. And taking failures or even successes too personally, getting easily discouraged or overly vain, always looking back at herself.
Her conclusion is quite stark. To do great things requires forgetfulness of self. But the independent woman is too busy looking for herself.
Exactly, trying to find her footing in a world not built for her.
What about performers? Actresses, dancers, she sees them differently.
In some ways, yes. Their career can align with femininity and narcissism. Success makes them more desirable. Beauty and charm are part of the job. Less inherent conflict.
But potential traps remain, like focusing on seduction over art.
Yeah, falling into self-worship. Or being tempted by male support instead of artistic risk. And that conflict with wanting a traditional husband and home can still pull at them. Self-admiration can kill talent ham acting.
Okay, and writers, artists, why are they drawn to this?
Often out of marginality. It's a way to express feelings, protest, create a world where they can reach themselves. Hence the stereotype of women scribbling in diaries.
But again, obstacles. Their work dismissed as ladies' work, lacking rigor.
Yes. Never having faced austere necessity, the need to meet objective standards, makes discipline hard. Temptation to cheat, rely on feeling over craft, like Marie Bashkirtseff not bothering to finish painting properly.
Believing spontaneity is enough, that writing and smiling are the same.
Right. Not realizing that raw feeling often results in cliches, as Paul had noted. They resist criticism because it feels like an attack on their very self.
This sterile vanity, cherishing the self, but not building it through work.
Leads to impoverished art. Focus on the self, not the world. Relying on cliches instead of authentic experience.
And fear of displeasing. The blue stocking label.
Still powerful. Fear of being scandalous leads to conformity, adding those expected feminine touches, aiming for bestsellers rather than breaking ground.
Though they might be original in person, that spark gets crushed in formal culture. Or they swing the other way and just imitate men.
Yeah, become pedantic, imitate virile vigor, lose their own voice. Competent, maybe, but not groundbreaking.
This reasonable modesty, she calls it, defines their limits. Few dare to go beyond it.
She does distinguish writers who accept society from insurgents like the Brontes or Austen. But even the insurgents, echoing Woolf, Used so much energy fighting constraints, they lacked the reserves for ultimate artistic freedom, the irony, the vast scope of a Tolstoy.
So their great achievement was often revealing women's dependence, pulling away the veils.
Which is liberation, yes. But stopping at critique isn't the same as recreating the world through art. They exhaust their courage in dissipating mirages, she says. They get to the edge but don't fully cross over. Never go beyond the pretext.
But she praises their strengths too. Observation, reporting, atmosphere, inner lives.
Oh yes, Cather, Wharton, Mansfield. They excel at describing their world's sensory detail. But creating convincing male heroes, harder. Vocabulary might be stronger than syntax.
Nature is a big theme for them.
As the other, a place of refuge and exile. But few, she thinks, capture its truly inhuman freedom, like Emily Bronte or Woolf.
What's ultimately missing, compared to the very greatest male artists?
Metaphysical depth, black humor, the courage to tackle the whole human condition. Because, she argues, they haven't fully assumed it yet as free subjects.
And again, this is situation, not destiny.
Absolutely. The limits come from the constraints, not inherent inability.
Which brings it back to freedom and transcendence. Art, philosophy, they try to remake the world based on human freedom. You need to be that freedom first.
Right. The daily struggle just to claim a place prevents that tearing oneself away. You need sovereign solitude.
That quote from Marie Bashkirtsev about needing freedom to just walk around alone.
Yes. Experiencing the world directly. But street hostility, the need to constantly project respectability, prevents that simple, fundamental freedom.
Unlike men's experiences, T.E. Lawrence's adventures. Physical limits, lack of sports. It all pushes towards passivity.
The core issue. Society pushes women to be objects, invested and dominated, not subjects, unique and sovereign. Even love teaches self-disavowal.
Misfortune can spark creativity, like for Emily Bronte, but it's rare for women to fully face that agonizing tête-à-tête with the world. Rosa Luxemburg may be an exception.
Yes, defined by mind and freedom. But generally, Beauvoir finds the profound reason for her mediocrity, meaning limitations compared to the greatest male geniuses, is that constraints stop her feeling responsible for the universe.
Great men, she says, take the weight of the world on their shoulders, identify with humanity, try to shape it. That role, historically, was only open to men.
Right. Genius like Van Gogh or Kafka needed experiences. Women were denied coal mines, cafes, brothels. They weren't authorized to live out humanity's fate, didn't feel collective suffering as their own crime.
St. Teresa is maybe the exception, who lived the human condition totally through faith.
Reaching a state beyond gender hierarchy, yes. But the overall point is stark. As long as women have to fight just to be recognized as human beings, they can't be creators on that ultimate scale.
But she doesn't end there. It's not resignation.
Not at all. It's a call to recognize that these limits are situational, historical, they can change.
She dismisses biological arguments, neurosis theories.
Completely. And historical arguments just describe the past. It's like Jefferson saying about America, or Black Americans responding to racism. Let us live first, then judge our potential.
The free woman is only just starting her journey.
And she ends with Rimbaud's incredible prophecy. Poets will be. When women are free, she too will be a poet. Women will find the unknown. It's time, Beauvoir says, to let women take their chances. Humanity has lost too much by stifling them.
So, pulling it all together. Work is vital, but not enough on its own. The independent woman Beauvoir saw was caught between worlds, facing huge internal and external pressures.
Exactly. Social expectations, relationship dynamics, domestic burdens, even limits on creative expression, all stemmed from systemic constraints on her freedom and experience, not some innate lack.
Her analysis is so rooted in her time 1940s France, the laws, the culture.
Definitely. But the core struggles, autonomy versus roles, the need for subjective freedom to create those feel pretty universal, don't they, even if the specifics change?
Yeah, they really do. Beauvoir saw these women as halfway, still figuring themselves out, still focused on clearing away the obstacles.
Rather than diving into the deeper mysteries, the other shadows that fuel the greatest art.
Which leaves us with a big question to ponder. Beauvoir suggests that truly great creators are those who take the weight of the world on their shoulders. Based on what we've discussed, what might it take for women, individually and collectively, now or in the future, to fully assume that kind of responsibility?